Welcome to another episode of Have You Heard This? Last week, the introductory record was Life Stream by Rick Nelson. That record fell into the category of an album that just never got the appreciation that it deserves for whatever reason. The second category, all these records will fall under three categories. That's the first one. The second one is albums that are cheap heat, albums you can find in the record store for less than $10, and they just may not get the audience it deserves because you may find another record within that pile of records that speaks to you more than these records, but nonetheless deserves some attention. And the last, when you see the record, you'll understand what I'm talking about, are records that were released to some success, but just don't get talked about enough and need more attention. And the first record that falls under this category is Tattoo You by the Rolling Stones. This record here is unique among the Rolling Stones catalog, as it's actually a mixture of studio outtakes from the 1970s. So all of them had some sort of framework done in the 70s, but they were polished in the 80s. And despite that, this record flows quite nicely. Another reason why I want to talk about this is Rolling Stones, very relevant right now, releasing a new album soon. And another artist who got some attention, Sonny Rollins, as unfortunately we lost him last week. Sonny Rollins appears on 3 tracks on this album. He appears on Slave, Neighbours, and Waiting on a Friend. And Waiting on a Friend is definitely his showpiece on this record. Another interesting thing about this record is it features some fantastic guests. Some were artists who played with the Rolling Stones, and one was Mick Taylor. He joined in 1969, played with them until 1974. And the other is Ian Stewart. Ian Stewart, to me, is one of their secret powers. He was an original member, but was fired by their manager, Andrew Loog Oldham, because he didn't fit the band's look. It's an interesting reason to fire someone, but that's none of my business. That being said, the Glimmer twins of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards felt otherwise, so they actually kept Ian Stewart as their road manager and a keyboardist for live appearances and records. But I did say there were 3, and I will say there are 3 keyboards on this record. That was one of them, Ian Stewart. Then we have Nicky Hopkins. Nicky Hopkins sort of helped pick up some of the keyboard roles from Ian Stewart when he was fired. Nicky Hopkins was a fantastic session musician, had some solo records of his own, which we'll get to later. And, when we're talking about important musicians of the 60s, 70s, 80s, Nicky Hopkins is definitely up there. And the last session keyboardist who was on here is Billy Preston. He was one of the few artists who's included in the list of musicians who recorded with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. He also had a successful solo career of his own. And you know what? Billy Preston is a very talented keyboardist. And those aren't the only special guests on this album. Pete Townsend also sings backup vocals. Ollie Brown plays percussion, and he had a hit in the 80s with Ollie and Jerry. If anybody remembers the song, please let me know. I believe it's Breakin'. It's hard. Breakin', I think that's the song. Anyways, back to this album. It was released in 1981. And to me, this is the last great Rolling Stones record. After this, they had a hit with Harlem Shuffle, which was, it was okay. It was a cover. There's nothing to be said about it. And They kept on releasing records, but to me, this is their last great record. And it needs to be listened to. And you know, there are a few standout tracks. Start Me Up, that's the opener. And boy, what an opener it is. It comes in swaggering with a catchy riff, catchy vocals, a lot of attitude. Exactly what the Rolling Stones are known for. And this is, you know, Start Me Up's become a classic in their catalog. And then you have Slave, another, it's a bit of a longer song, but it offers the same sort of attitude, and Neighbours as well. And then Waiting on a Friend. I do have to talk about that song. That, to me, is one of the highlights of the album. Waiting on a Friend is a ballad-ish, somewhat calypso-y, but not quite. And it features a fantastic Sonny Rollins solo. You know, that's kind of the heart of that tune. And you know, this record, you know, when it was released, it did get some good reviews, but within the pantheon of Rolling Stones records, this one's just not talked about enough, in my opinion. Very few bands can take a bunch of studio outtakes and cobble up a well thought out, cohesive record. And this will remain one of my favorite Rolling Stones records, and to me, one of their better albums that deserves some attention. So hopefully you'll listen to this and you'll understand the mastery of this album. And you know, this is a Canadian pressing, and it was released on Rolling Stones Records, but distributed by Warner. I'm sure that's information some of you out there are interested in, but you know, take a listen to this record. Let me know what you think of it. And I know some people are thinking, yeah, I've heard this before, but take a listen again. Understand it. Appreciate how cohesive it is. And yeah, it's a great album. So please listen and let me know what you think. And next week, I'll introduce a record that I believe falls under the category of cheap heat. And hopefully you enjoy this series. Thanks for watching.